Hi, I'm Gina. Today, I'm going to be walking you through the deep dive, your first ontology function on learn.palantir.com. If you haven't tried out functions before and you're looking to get started, this is a great place to begin. Before we get started, a quick word from our founder.
Discover how Palantir customers unlock more value from Foundry and AIP thanks to our live instructor-led trainings. We are Ontologize, a group of former Palantir engineers who love teaching. We've trained thousands of Palantir users at leading organizations around the world. Unlock the full potential of your Palantir deployment by going to ontologize.com.
Starting from learn.palantir.com, you're going to navigate to courses, and you're going to go to Speedrun, your first ontology function. Now make sure that you're signed in and registered for the course. First, you have the course introduction with some high-level information about TypeScript functions and some key features of functions. Also, some explanation of TypeScript functions versus the alternative, and of course, when to use other tools. Here we have some information on permissions and help, and lastly, the use case. Here we have the scenario overview of the use case. And so in this setting, we're going to be trying to figure out how well hospitals are converting their services into actual payments. By the time we finish the course, we'll have this workshop application. Next up, we have the introduction. And next up, we have some instructions for creating a Foundry Learning project. You don't need to create one if you have one already, but if you have not created a project, you should go through these steps to create your project. Now, if you do have a project already, you're still going to have to create a course-specific training folder. And so now we're going to hop into Foundry. So from wherever you are in Foundry, you're going to search for your project, or if you just made it, you probably have it open. So Control-J, and I'll search for Gina Learning Project, and open that up. And so from here, we're going to hit New, make a new folder, and this one's going to be called Speedrun, your first ontology function. And now we have our folder. So now that we've created our course-specific folder, we're going to begin with uploading the data. So we're going to be uploading data via installing a marketplace product. And so here we have the instructions for deploying the marketplace product. The marketplace product that we're going to be installing is called Speedrun, your first ontology function. So from wherever you are in Foundry, you're going to hit Control-J, and you're going to search for marketplace. Now open that up in a new tab. And now from here, you're going to search for Speedrun. So here we have Speedrun, your first ontology function. And so here, we're going to click either Install or Install Again, and select the namespace that you're installing in. So this is going to be Ontologize Public, and also the target ontology. Now, instead of creating a new project on install, we're going to hit Use Existing Location. And in that case, it took me straight to Speedrun, your first ontology function, which is the file that I just created. And now you're going to hit Save. And then you're going to hit Next. Now, be sure to prefix the ontology entities with your name in case colleagues of yours are also completing this course. And then you're going to hit Next, and then Install. So now our installation is completed and we're ready to move on. So now that we've deployed these assets, we're going to hit Next and move on to this next section where we're going to create a function-backed variable. So back in Foundry, we're going to start by creating a code repository. So we're going to hit New, and search for code repository, click on that one. And now when you initialize a repository, you have a choice for what kind of repository it is. So normally, if you're writing a pipeline, for example, you would do pipelines. In this case, you're going to select functions. Now, you have options here, TypeScript functions, Python functions, and TypeScript functions v2, which is experimental. For now, we're just going to stick with TypeScript functions. As always, you can always use AIP logic for a no-code option. So here, we're going to choose TypeScript functions, give it a name. So we're going to call this my first function, and then your name. And now you're going to initialize the repository. So now here we are in code repositories, which is where we're going to author our function. So now in order to write our functions on objects, we're going to need to import our object types. So to do that, we're going to add references by going to the left-hand side to Resource Imports. And here we can import things from the ontology, query functions, models, sources, and function interfaces. So from here, we're going to hit Add. and then choose Ontology. Now we have to select from which ontology we're adding from, and then hit Done. And now we can choose object types to import. And so here I'm going to add 2 object types, clinic and financial. So I'm going to search for clinic. So I'm going to add clinic, and then financial. And then add financial, and then hit save. So now we're ready to write functions that use these object types. Now next up, we're going to add code to the repository. Now luckily, the course actually provides the code for you to copy and paste. But first, let's navigate to the file where we're going to put our code. So we're going to go to Files. And then you'll see that within the source parent folder, we have index.ts. Make sure you're not in the index.ts file that's in the tests folder. So you're going to click on this one. And here is where you're going to paste the code. So we're going to delete everything here and paste this code in. Now note that you're going to have to change some things. So in the code that I'm importing, it's trying to import an object called clinic, and I did not actually import that because the object type that I imported is called Gina clinic. And so the way that I can fix this is I'll go to my imports. And if you look at the clinic object that I've imported, you can see that its API name is actually Gina clinic. So I'm going to change this to Gina clinic. And you'll want to do the same on your end for your name. And so every time we see clinic like this, we're going to want to change this to Gina clinic, or again, your name. Now, the other thing that we're going to have to change here is that when we're invoking financials, we don't actually have financials, we have Gina financial. And so now we should be good to go. Just make sure you do the same for your implementation for your name. Before we test this out, let's talk about what's going on here. So first, we have our imports. So here we're importing essential types from Foundry's Functions API. So numeric types like double, function decorators, a couple of other specialized types. So you'll see that we're importing Gina clinic, which is the object type from my installation of the marketplace product. Then we're also importing objects from the Foundry Ontology API. And so this is a utility provided by the Ontology API that allows you to perform certain operations on object types like searches, filters, traversing links between objects. So now we start by defining our class called myFunctions, and that's going to contain our business logic. So here we define our main function. And so this function is going to calculate the days sales outstanding metric, which measures how quickly a clinic connects its revenue. So you'll notice that this is decorated with the @function decorator. And so that's going to expose this function to the Foundry platform so that we can use it throughout the platform. So note here that it accepts an optional clinic parameter, and that's what allows us to calculate the days sales outstanding, or DSO, for a specific clinic or across all clinics. Now, you'll see that the function returns a promise that resolves to a double, which is Foundry's precise numeric type. So next up, we're calling the group financial data method, which returns an array with 2 separate 2-dimensional aggregations. And then we're using array destructuring to immediately assign these 2 aggregations to separate variables, total billed by month and total revenue by month. So we start by extracting the starting revenue from the first bucket of our billing data, and then we pass the data into our specialized calculation method to determine the actual DSO value. So now we have some helper functions. So we have this helper function, group financial data, and this private method handles the data aggregation that we need for our DSO calculation. So we're going to start out by creating a query for all financial objects in our ontology, and so that's the objects.search.gina financial. Now, if a specific clinic was provided, we're going to filter the data to include only that clinic's financials. So now we use the group by method to aggregate billing amounts by month. And then once again, we aggregate collected revenue by month. Now, the problem here is that the results are going to come back in ascending chronological order, but we need descending order for our calculations, so we need to reverse both bucket arrays. Now, finally, we're going to return both aggregations as a tuple for further processing. So now we have our calculation function count back days sales outstanding equation. And so this function implements the actual DSO calculation using a custom approach that counts backwards through monthly revenue data. So we start by initializing our DSO counter to 0, and then we'll accumulate days as we process each month. So we iterate through each month's revenue bucket, working backwards in time. And for each month, we calculate the number of days by getting the maximum timestamp and subtracting 1 day. If the month's revenue is less than our starting revenue, we add the full month to our DSO. Now, if the month's revenue exceeds our remaining balance, we add a proportional fraction of the month and exit the loop. After each month, we reduce our remaining balance by that month's collected revenue. And now once we complete that, we return the final DSO value, representing how many days of sales are typically outstanding. And so now we have our function. Before we release this function, we're going to want to test it out. And so down here, you'll see this functions option. So if we click on functions, this gives you the opportunity to live preview functions, even those that you haven't published yet. So here, you'll see calculate days sales outstanding, which is recognized due to the function decorator. So we're going to click on calculate days sales outstanding. And here, we could specify a clinic, but we can also just do it for all of them. And then we can hit run. And so here we have a result 40.5, which based on the course is correct. And so now we're going to deploy and tag our function. So from here, you're going to hit commit and then commit. And now that you've committed your function, you're going to see this option to tag a version. And so this is going to be a major tag because we wrote the whole function. And then you're going to hit tag and release. And now if we go to branches and go to tags and release, we can see our function being built. So now the checks have succeeded and we're ready to go use our function in Workshop. So now from here, you're going to go put your function in your Workshop app. So to do this, you can navigate back to your project to the Speedrun, your first Ontology function folder, and go to the Clinic Finance Tracker. From here, you'll see that we have something going on in this workshop, but we're clearly missing a metric and days sales outstanding. So from here, we'll go to Edit. So from here, we're going to make a variable that calls our function. So we're going to go to the variables, make a new variable. It's a numeric variable that is backed by a function. And we're going to call this one days sales outstanding. Now, the function that we're going to be using is calculate days outstanding. And we know it's the right one because it's on GNet Clinic, which is the one I made. And now we don't necessarily need a function input. And so our value is 40.5, which is correct. And so now let's connect it to the metric card. So we're going to go to the metric card, click into days sales outstanding, change this to days sales outstanding, the numeric variable. And now we have populated our metric card with the result of our function. So now that you've created your first function-backed variable, we're going to move on to something more complicated, which is creating a function-backed column in Workshop. And so we're going to start by adding an additional function to our code. So to do that, you're going to navigate back to your repository, go to your code, and now in the same index.ts file, you're going to add some more code. So you're going to take the code and paste it right here. It looks like we have an extra bracket, so we'll get rid of that. So now remember, we don't have clinic, we have GNet Clinic or your name clinic. And so we're going to change this, so GNet Clinic. Then here as well, so GNet Clinic. And then also here, GNet Clinic. So what this function does is it creates a mapping of each clinic to its days sales outstanding value. So we can see this as a new column in a table. So like before, we have the function decorator. So we're going to start by initializing an empty map. We query all of the GNet Clinic objects from our ontology all in one batch. Then we create an array of promises by calling calculate days sales outstanding for each clinic. Next up, using promise all, we wait for all of the DSO calculations to complete in parallel. Now, second to last, we loop through each clinic and store its calculated DSO value in our map. And then, last but not least, we return the completed map, which Foundry can use as a function column. And now we're going to go test out our function. So to do that, we can go to functions, and now we'll see we have our live preview. We have function column days sales outstanding. And from here, we can just run it and see that indeed it's taking each clinic and it is giving a value for that clinic. So now from here, we're going to commit and then hit commit again. And now we can tag a version. And this might be major as well, so we'll tag and release. And so now we can go to branches and then tags and released to see that checks have succeeded and everything is ready to go. So now we're going to go back to our workshop and we're going to add in a derived column here. So So we're going to click on the table, hit add column, and this is going to be a function back property. And so the function is going to be function column days sales outstanding. So we just select the version, and this one takes no inputs. And so we're going to want to change the name here since it's a little bit long. So we're going to change this to days sales outstanding. Now we're going to turn numeric formatting on. And for the base type, we're going to use a custom unit here. This is going to be days. Now let's add some conditional formatting. So we're going to go to map, hit 22, click in this box, and change this to a property. So apply formatting if days sales outstanding, let's say, is greater than 40. So we're going to change this from 22 to 40. And it should be red in that case, so danger. And then we'll hit update rule, add rule. So math again. So this time, days sales outstanding is greater than 35. Then it's going to be yellow, so warning. And then one more rule. So again, in math, we're going to change this from 22 to days sales outstanding and is greater than 30. And then we're going to hit update rule. And so here we have a little bit of color in our column now. Next up, we're going to create a function back chart in Workshop. So here we're given some additional code to write a new function. So you're going to go back to your repository and you're going to paste that code in. Now, before we do anything, again, we have to change this to match our object names. So Gina, clinic, and we should be good otherwise. And so what this function does is it calculates days sales outstanding on a month-over-month basis so we can create a nice chart in Workshop. So first we get the monthly billing and revenue data by calling the group financial data method. Then we create an empty aggregation object that will hold our monthly DSO values. And now for each month in our billing data, we calculate that month's DSO value. We use the current month's billed amount as the starting revenue for our calculation. Then we add each month's calculated DSO to our aggregation. Now, after each calculation, we remove the oldest month from our revenue data to maintain the correct time window. And so the shifting that we're doing ensures that each DSO calculation uses the correct months of revenue data. So finally, we return the complete month-by-month DSO aggregation, which we're going to use to power our chart in Workshop. So now we have our live preview. We can see that we have another function here. We have calculate days sales outstanding month over month. Let's expand this window so we can see more. So we'll hit run. And then we have our chart. Now, of course, that's going to render a little better in Workshop. Now, just like we did before, we're going to commit, tag version. I'll say that this is major again, and then tag and release. And now we're going to wait for our checks to pass, and then we'll be able to try this out in Workshop. Now we can check to see when our checks have passed by going to branches, tags and release. And so we still have to wait for this to pass, but once it does, we'll be ready to use it in Workshop. And now the checks have succeeded, so we're ready to go back into Workshop and try out our function. So back in Workshop, we have this XY chart, but we don't have a lot going on here. And so we're going to click on this, click into layer. And now instead of defining this chart with an object set like we normally do, we're going to hit function. And the function, of course, is going to be calculate days sales outstanding MOM. Now there's only one option here for functions, even though we've authored 3, because only certain functions with certain types of returns can back a chart. So we're going to click on this. And now again, it does not require any inputs. So we can change this from a bar chart to, say, a line chart if we so choose. And so even though this function doesn't require arguments, it would be a nice user experience to be able to click on a specific clinic and see the chart update. And so to do that, we're going to change clinic to object table 1 active object, which is the output from the table. And so here, now we can click and see how this chart changes. And now we're going to hit save. And we're going to move on to our last function. So far, we've been focusing on doing calculations with functions on objects, but now we're actually going to create a function back action. So now we're going to hit next. And so we're going to add in this code snippet into our code to author our last function. So back in your code repository, you're going to return to your code. And so we're going to paste in this new code snippet right above that curly brace. Delete that extra one. Now again, we have clinic here, but this is supposed to be Gina clinic or your name. And now everything looks correct here. So let's take a look at what this is doing. You might notice that there's something different about this function than the others. So this has the ontology edit function decorator. And so this means that we can back an action with this function. So this decorator signifies that this function can modify the ontology and allows us to actually discover it when we're creating function-backed actions. So this function, the only argument is going to be the clinic. And so a user is going to choose the clinic. And then when the user clicks this action button, the function is going to check the clinic's under review field and flips it to the opposite value, so from true to false or from false to true. Now, if a clinic is currently under review, the action will set under review field to false and remove any existing improvement goal. If the clinic is not under review, then the action will set the under review field to true and calculate the clinic's DSO, and then set a new improvement goal that's between 70 and 95% of the current DSO. And so now we can test this out by hitting run. And so now we can go to clinic edit function, select a clinic to try this out on, maybe a struggling clinic, and then hit run. And so you'll see it changed the under review from false to true, and it set a goal of 58. And now we're going to go through the same steps. We're going to commit. And then we're going to tag a version. It's going to be major, tag and release, and now we'll wait for our checks to pass. And so now when I go to branches and tags and releases, I can see that our checks have passed and we're ready to go. So the thing to know about our next step is that functions are pure. They're not going to have any side effects, which means if we actually want this function to do something, we're going to have to wrap it in an action. And so to do that, from wherever you are, you're going to hit Control-J and search for Ontology Manager. Open that up in a new tab. Now that you're in Ontology Manager, you're going to go to New, Action Type. And instead of what you would normally do, which is you would click Object and go from there, we're going to go to Function, select a function. You'll notice that not all the functions that we authored are showing up here. In fact, only one of them is, because only one has the edit decorator. So clinic edit function. It takes in one argument, it is the clinic. And then we're going to hit next, give it a name. I'll call this Gina, set clinic goal, and then hit next. So who can carry out this action? This is not a production action, so I'm going to say everybody, and then hit create. And now I'm going to hit save. And now the last thing that we're going to do is we're going to pop this action into our workshop application. So you're going to return to workshop, and we have this section that we haven't paid attention to yet, the inline action form or table. And so that's because this needs an action. And so from here, we're going to go to add item. And the action that we're going to add is Gina set clinic goal, of course. Here, we're going to set the parameter defaults to the currently selected clinic. And so the parameter defaults, it takes in one argument, clinic, and we're going to change the default value to the object table 1 active object, which means, for example, if I select struggling clinic, then hit submit, then now you'll see that this clinic has a goal. And now our clinic finance dashboard is complete. So as a review, we authored 4 different functions. So we have one function to calculate the days sales outstanding. We wrote another function column days sales outstanding that derives a column. We authored a function to back a chart. So that's this one here. And finally, we authored a function to create a function-backed action. So now you've completed the course. And here, there's options for reaching out for feedback and some additional learning materials. Thanks for watching. We hope you found this helpful. Be sure to let us know what you want to see next in the comments.